This episode of When Does It End? Podcast series focuses on serving the HIV needs of youth across the United States. The episode will discuss how the current social justice movement of youth can be leveraged in ending the HIV epidemic initiative. Discuss how youth involvement can make sustainable changes in reaching youth impacted by HIV. The host will talk with youth guests about social determinants of health, social media, and how they influence the youth's relationship with HIV services and service providers. Throughout the podcast, the guests will discuss the disparities with various subpopulations in the youth community related to the social determinants of health and how they have put the community at greater risk of acquiring and transmitting HIV. The guests will also highlight programs, strategies, and culturally appropriate ways to ally with youth to end the epidemic.
What's up? What's up? What's up? And welcome back to yet another episode of When Does It End? So far, we have talked about Black and Asian communities, and it's now time to talk about a community that we all have been or will be or are a part of. In today's segment, we'll be talking about youth and the importance of youth engagement in ending the HIV epidemic in America. Here with us today, we have Lee O'Reilly, Joy Barnes, and Amanda Robinson, three advocates and community leaders that support and represent the voices of today's young people. But before we bring them on, Tori and I are going to give you a brief history of a young person who changed the HIV landscape forever.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome back, everyone. And again, hello all kin folks, all skin folks, and all folks. We recently commemorated the 33rd, World AIDS Day, when we honored all those whose lives have been lost to HIV and AIDS. And we remember those who are still in the fight. On December 6, 2021, Ryan White would have turned 50 years old. Ryan was a youth and then a young man who contracted HIV through a blood transfusion. He was an innocent white kid from the Midwest. I mean, it doesn't get more of a perfect scenario for folks to take on your cause. He had the support of his parents, especially his mom, Jeannie, who's still an impactful and powerful advocate for people who are living with HIV. So much of the HIV care system is actually named after Ryan. Ever heard of ADAP? The AIDS Drug Assistance Program? Well, how about the Ryan White Program? Well, all three of these are actually the same thing. This is the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program. Provides a comprehensive system of HIV primary medical care, essential support services, and medications for low-income people who are living with HIV. The program funds grants to states, cities, counties, and local community-based organizations to provide care and treatment services to people who are living with HIV, to improve health outcomes and reduce HIV transmission among hard-to-reach populations, and that's according to the HRSA website. There are 5 Ryan White program parts, which Chris and I will tell you a little bit about, and then we will welcome our incredible guests.
For those of you that don't know, during the early days of the HIV epidemic in the 80s, there was a name for the groups of people thought to be the cause or the only ones that acquire the virus that we know today as HIV. And that group of folk was called the 4-H Club. Those 4-H's stood for homosexuals, heroin users, Haitians, and hemophiliacs. And by far the most famous hemophiliac diagnosed with HIV and later diagnosed with AIDS was Ryan White, a 13-year-old boy from a small town in Indiana. As Tori mentioned earlier, his story is so important in HIV history because his life and struggles with discrimination from his community, from his school, and even sometimes from his family inform policy change efforts that have lasted till today. It has enhanced the resources for thousands living with HIV during this time and beyond. This young one person and his family was able to make an impactful change and leave a long-lasting legacy. Today, the Ryan White program is why thousands of people living with HIV and at risk of HIV acquisition have access to free or low-cost resources.
Yes, agreed. All of that stuff is right. So Part A funds medical and support services to eligible metropolitan areas, or what we call EMAs, and transitional grant areas, which we call TGAs. EMAs and TGAs are counties or cities, municipalities that are the most severely affected by the HIV/AIDS epidemic.
Part B administers funds for states and territories to improve the quality, availability, and organization of HIV care and support services. In addition to Part B also includes grants for the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, otherwise known as APIAHF.
Part C administers funds for local community-based organizations to provide comprehensive primary health care and support services in an outpatient setting for people who are living with HIV through Early Intervention Services Program grants. Part C also funds capacity development grants, which help organizations more effectively deliver HIV care and services.
Part D administers funds for local community-based organizations to provide outpatient, ambulatory, and family-centered primary and specialty medical care for women, infants, children, and youth with HIV. Part D funding may also be used to provide supportive services to people living with HIV and their affected family members.
Part F funds support clinician training, dental services, and dental provider training. In addition, Part F funds the development of innovative methods of care to improve health outcomes and reduce HIV transmission. These programs include the Special Projects of National Significance, which we also refer to as SPINS, which develops, evaluates, and replicates innovative strategies and interventions, for HIV care, treatment, and support to improve health outcomes for people who are living with HIV and to reduce HIV transmission. The AIDS Education and Training Centers program advances interprofessional training, practices transformation, and conducts HIV training for providers. The dental programs, which provide additional funding for oral health care for people who are living with HIV through the HIV/AIDS Dental Reimbursement Program and the Community-Based Dental Partnership Program, and the Minority AIDS Initiative, which improves access to HIV care and health outcomes for disproportionately affected minority populations, including Black and African American people.
Wow, with so much great information. Tori, thank you for keeping the people informed and on their toes. It's amazing to me to see how the life of one teenager has impacted the lives of so many. And with that, I think we should bring on our guests, Leo, Joy, and Amanda, 3 community leaders who are blazing the trails of advocacy in their own and innovative way. Leo, Joy, and Amanda, can you please introduce yourself by sharing your pronouns, where you live, what you do, and why you believe youth engagement is integral to ending the HIV epidemic in America?
Okay, I'm going to start, starting with me. My name is Amanda Robinson, and I'm based out of Dallas, Texas, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization called Real Life Connection, and we are mostly known for an event that we host called Dallas Teen Pride, which brings out about 10,000 young people. Pronouns are she, her, and they.
I can hop in next. Hello, my name is Leo. I'm based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I am currently a Master of Social Work student. I'm also a youth activist myself. So I do work in Michigan and Southeast Michigan, specifically around sexual and reproductive health with youth. I currently co-facilitate the My Access Youth Advisory Council, which is a youth advisory council at the Michigan Organization of Adolescent Sexual Health, made up of disabled young folks and their allies working for accessible, comprehensive sex education in the state of Michigan, and also some legislative advocacy. So that's kind of the area that I'm working in right now. I'm excited to see where I go from here, though.
I guess I'll go next. My name is Tori. I'm a youth advocate also based out of Baltimore, Maryland. Primarily working at the current moment with youth with substance use disorder and their families. However, HIV, the war on drugs, and looking at kind of how all these health disparities impact each individual person are kind of my specialty. So it's nice to be here. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank y'all for the introductions. I'm so overjoyed and ecstatic to have each of you here with me. As y'all know, I'm a young person. So when I meet other young people, when I meet people who do impactful and engaging work within youth communities, I get so excited and overjoyed. And even going back to talking about the history and the legacy of Ryan White, it brings so much pride for me with Ryan White being a young person within this field of work who had lived with HIV and had to live with AIDS during a time of so much uncertainty, and how his life has created a legacy for hundreds and thousands of young people today and young people to come, I wanted to start off our conversation with asking you all, what does pride mean to you all? I think that from his story, receiving a blood transfusion that led to him acquiring HIV and having to learn how to advocate for himself, his narrative brings so much pride to the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to ask you all, when we talk about pride, and even with you, Amanda, by you hosting a team pride every year, what does pride mean to you all? And feel free to answer the question in this order, Joy, Leo, and Amanda.
So to me, pride is love. Like quintessentially, it is love. Love of, and that could be with anything, right? Like, we have, Black pride or LGBTQ plus pride, like whatever type of pride it is, pride in whatever community that you're a part of, quintessentially, the pride that you feel or the connection that you feel to that community is love. And that's kind of what is the driving force behind, what pride means to me. Like as a African-American woman, like my pride in my people, my pride in my just in who I am comes from my connection to others, and kind of seeing, I guess, not only where we've been, but also where we can go, and having and loving us enough to be a part of that work. So that's what pride means to me.
I think pride to me means solidarity. I think that one of the things about Ryan White specifically that really stands out to me is that he did a ton of incredible advocacy as a young person, kind of because he had to and was thrown into it. But I think it also says something that he was a white young boy who was not a drug user and was not openly gay, at least. And I think that it says a lot that his story was the one that got folks to start to change the way that they approached the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And so I think that for me, pride means solidarity, not just with your own community, but with other communities experiencing things. I think it means revolution. I think that it means transformation. I think it means looking at your positionality in the world and the positionality of others and finding the ways that those positionalities work in conjunction with each other to create lasting change.
For me, I think I'm going to just start with the creed that we have for my nonprofit and my organization, if you guys don't mind me reading it. And it's actually the Ryan Wright creed, that we actually read off at fundraisers and events and various youth events that we have. And it states, here is what you see. Yet what stands before thee with strength and determination to hold an open mind of the world, set forth me, for knowing I shall not stride, always from the passion within me, to educate, battle, and victoriously win against any issue that I face, with a positive heart and a receiving hand, to make a chain that will link an equal nation, to stand together and shout out loud, we've won. And so to me, to summarize that in a short version is unification. You need to be prideful in anything and everything that you do. And I know when we think about the word pride and we talk about pride, we always associate it with LGBTQIA plus issues. But as a nation, I think we definitely need to consume pride and get back to a prideful place just in being humans and taking care of each other in a prideful way. So that's what pride really stands for me and stands out to me. It's a protest. When I hear the word pride, I hear adversity, I hear oppression, and so that's what I see when I hear and see the word pride. So I think we get away a lot of times from what the real word of pride really stood for and what it meant when we even started pride.
I think that was powerful. That was an absolutely powerful statement that you just read. So while we have you, and then followed by Leo, I'd like you both to respond to this. So Marsha P. Johnson was only 23 when she instigated the Stonewall riots, which in turn marked the very beginning of the modern gay rights movement. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. How has youth activism changed over time?
Oh, it's changed in a lot of ways. Youth have a voice now, as opposed to even me. I graduated high school, not to age myself, but in 1998, 97, right? And the idea of youth or gay youth or anything pertaining to youth was very obsolete. Youth didn't have a place. It was be seen and not heard. And that's what you were taught as a young person. You know, you kind of mind your business, you don't really have a voice, and you just kind of, you know, stay out of the way. And you do what children are supposed to do. You stay in a child's place is what you're told. But now as we've transitioned, and even with the founding of events like mine, like Team Pride, you know, I started Team Pride in 2014. Gay marriage wasn't passed yet. And so me going and talking to people about LGBTQIA youth was still very obsolete. No such thing as a gay teenager. And I mean, we've been protested so many times from saying we're turning kids gay, you know, which is no such of a thing, obviously. So I think with Generation Z, which I have one of those in my home currently, they care more so about, are you a good person? How do you treat me? What do you represent and what do you stand for, as opposed to anything extra on the outside. Keep in mind, we also come from, my parents were, you know, very religious, and religion was on the forefront of everything for them. And so now we've transitioned to where, you know, we're the parents, and religion wasn't necessarily always directly on the forefront and leading the household and how we structured our families, to where we really cared more about the character of who you are and how you present yourself and how you handle and treat people. And so I think youth now have a voice, as opposed to they didn't have a voice when I was a youth and a young person. And they're very boisterous now. They have the internet we didn't have, you know, and so, you know, that's where now adults are scared of cancel culture, because there was no such thing as cancel culture. And so now young people will cancel you in a heartbeat if you don't show up and present yourself politically correct, you know, or socially correct. And so I love it. I think it's amazing. And I want them to continue to push and continue to have that voice. All the change we see in our political structure right now is young people. It's not us. It's the 18-year-olds that's going out to the polls to vote to create the change. And so young people now have really had an awakening that they are here and they've arrived.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with all of that. So as a young person myself, I don't necessarily have as long-term of a historical perspective to compare it to where it's been, but I can tell you, as an older member of Gen Z, we are not messing around. I think that there is absolutely more space for young people in activism. And I think a lot of that is because we're taking the space. And this is not to say that youth in the past have not been taking the space. They absolutely have been. It's just that there are more opportunities for us to do that now. I think it's really amazing in a lot of ways. One of the things that is really important to me is that we're not just doing the work, but we are getting paid to do the work. We are not showing up and doing this work for free, and we're not doing that anymore. And that is something that I think is really powerful, that really values the work of young people in a way that I think hasn't necessarily been valued in the past. I can say even in just the time I've been doing youth activism, I've been engaging in advocacy work since I was 13, maybe. So coming up on 10 years. I would say that there's definitely been a shift as social media gets more and more, commonly used, as a lot of our life shifts online. When I was coming into activism, it was actually initially online because I was a young person in a very conservative town, going to a Lutheran school, where that was kind of the only place where I could express myself. And so I made an Instagram account for LGBTQ youth, and that was kind of my first experience with advocacy. And since then, now I'm able to work in very publicly facing positions. I co-facilitate a youth council. I'm not just on the council. They are having young people, and my other co-facilitator is also a college student. And so it's we are not just doing the work, but we're in leadership positions getting paid to do the work. So I think that's one major way that it's changed. I think maybe on a less positive note, I've noticed a lot of young folks, because we're able to do the work and get paid, there isn't quite as much grassroots organizing or that kind of work. I do want to say there's a ton of youth doing that work, but I've noticed a little bit of, I think, a values shift in the way we approach that work. I think that we may be losing our roots in grassroots organizing somewhat, which is something that I don't love to see and don't want to see. And I'm hoping that as young people continue growing up, we're able to continue engaging in activism in a lot of different ways. But I think overall, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I've really, just even as a person throughout my life, seen a massive change in the way that youth voices are valued. And so that's something that I've really appreciated.
Oh my gosh, thank both of you for that. It's commonly possible for one person to drop the mic, but both of y'all just dropped the mic in less than 5 minutes. So I appreciate just your varying perspective on how youth activism has changed over time. Joy, this next question is specifically for you because I know that you've done like a lot of work with like the Black Lives Matter movement and Black liberation movement like within your area. So I would like to ask you, Joy, how can young people become active in social movements of today?
Not being afraid of doing the tasks that aren't as glamorous, right? Like protest is the big thing because people can see you can post a selfie about it. And I'm not saying it's not important because it truly is. It's one of the most important parts of being a part of a movement. But it's not the only part of being a movement. Somebody's got to speak. In order for the people to go protest, somebody's got to watch everybody's kids. In order for people to go protest, somebody has to drive the buses. In order for people to go, in order, everybody has a role. And to not be so caught up in the roles that people see or the roles that people glamorize because we want to be seen, and really kind of finding your niche, because you will no longer find me protesting. What you will find me doing now is feeding the community, feeding the protesters, making sure that, the immediate community that I'm in is safe. I do mostly substance use work now. So, making sure you have access to Narcan, access to counselors, the bail numbers if you're going to go protest. Though that is my ministry now, because I found a niche, but no one was talking about who somebody needs to feed the people out there when we were out there. And now that I have this lane, I stay in it. Because ultimately too, when you're in movements and you're doing things that are not that are not like first nature to you or like second nature to you, you could end up also getting hurt. You could also end up and getting other people hurt because it's not your lane, right? So making sure that you experiment with different things in movements, if that's feeding people, if that's volunteering, if that's watching people's kids, if that's going to go protest, not being afraid to do that, not being afraid of doing your research, and really doing things that your heart wants to do, I think is really how you can kind of get involved in movements past just, posting about it. Like if you really want to be about it, and posting is posting also is a part of it too. Like if you're just a poster, if you're an information disseminator, let that be your ministry and let that be enough. Like that's okay. But whatever it is that is your part, doing it to the fullest extent, knowing all that you can about it and doing it to the best of your ability, that is how you can get involved in movements.
That was phenomenal. And Chris is going to ask the next question. But what I just heard from you all is that you need a message. You need messengers. You need somebody in the mess hall preparing the food. And that you need somebody to carry the message in addition to the messengers, to communicate the message. Sometimes you need translators. And that doesn't just mean translating from English to Spanish or Spanish to French. Sometimes it means translating north side to east side. That
exactly.
Southeast, SOUF, East DC to Baltimore.
Listen, Tori, every soldier is not on the front line.
That's exactly right. And a lot of
fight the war. That's
invisible roles to be. That's so very, very important. You just confirmed a lot of things. So let's talk a little bit about activism, particularly youth activism as it pertains to the HIV epidemic. I'd be interested to hear from a couple of you all. What's the role of young people in ending the HIV epidemic in the United States?
Again, kind of the piggyback off of what Joy said, which is, young people are more visible, right? And I think the conversation now has to shift. Even me being a parent, I have a 13-year-old in my household. And now the conversation has to change. If my 13, 14, 18 plus year old young person comes to me and identifies as anything that is considered high risk, that means now the conversation has to shift for me as a parent around what does safe, adult, responsible choices look like. And that may be introduction to PrEP very early. That may be introduction to birth control early. And so the same precautions as a parent that I want to take around heteronormacies, are the same precautions now, but I need to add an additional step to that conversation if my kid identifies with a high-risk behavior. And so I think that's the mark that a lot of parents are currently still missing, which is why we have these statistics still off the chain for young people, is the fact that, yes, it's okay to parade and throw the coming out story, but now what is the next step to prepare me to be an adult to live this lifestyle? And these are the particular precautions that need to be taken in order for you to be able to move forward. And I think that conversation has to become more of a regular, everyday type of conversation as opposed to a taboo. Whether parents want to believe it or not, their children are having sex. I'm a straight shooter. I don't sugarcoat it. I mean, I'm sorry. Abstinence before sex conversation. We all want our children to do that. I'm a mom. I want my child to do that. And I'm a parent that identifies same gender loving. But at the same time, I also am not oblivious to the reality of what my child is exposed to, as you hear me say. Either content on television is either too much or not enough, you know? And so because I understand the reality that my child is being raised in from social media, they have access to things. They don't need me truly for a parent to do anything. They can go anything they want to go get, they can Google. There's a YouTube video how to do anything you want to think of out there in this world. So as a parent, you have to decide either you're going to educate your child or the world is going to educate your child. And so for me, I think it takes, again, more visual presence of all of us and shows like this, being able to stand out on the forefront to say, you know what, this isn't a taboo, you know, regardless of who like it or who don't like it, we're not going anywhere. We've been around a long time and not going anywhere. And so how do we normalize and how do we create what your version of healthy looks like? Because Chris's version of healthy, Leo's version of healthy, and my version of healthy are all going to look totally different. It's a personalized individual thing. And so until we get to that point, nationally, culturally, you know what I mean? We're going to continue to have these issues with our young people. And so I think it takes people like us stepping up, being present, being visual, and saying, you know what, we need to be having these types of conversations with our young people, because again, you don't want to call the fire department when your house is already burning down. You need to know the fire department exists before the fire even starts. And so I think it's very important to be able to have access and information, you know, that we're putting out like this.
Everything that you said is like very so much important, because like I said, given how what society and culture looks like today, young people have access. Young people have access to the same information that we have access to, right? And so we have to prepare today's youth to be able to handle those culture, to handle society, to handle those external influences that may not always be the most protective for them, right? So it's about making sure that we are tailoring and catering resources in ways that are known to them and are understandable to them, and they can obtain them. Leo, I know that you do a lot of amazing work with MOASH, and I know that you have previously sat on the HIV Prevention Council. So with this same question, I kind of want to hear from you. So what do you think is the role of young people with ending the HIV epidemic within America?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point that I want to jump off of is something, Amanda, you said that really resonated with me. You said that either you will educate your child or the world will educate your child. And I think I want to add to that a little bit. If those two things don't do it, other children will. Kids talk to each other. And I think that one of the major things that we're seeing at MOASH is that we're giving young folks a place to learn how to do that in a safe and efficient way, and in a way that is not stigmatizing. I think this is something that I've really appreciated about being in Gen Z, is that we are okay talking about sex, but it's something that is so heavily stigmatized. There's such a taboo talking about young folks having sex that we don't want to think about it. And so I think that's a major place where it comes in, is if we can empower young folks to feel like they can talk about sex openly and positively in a way that centers their pleasure and their experience and their joy. They'll be able to talk about it with their friends in a way that reflects that. And it won't just be, oh my God, like, did you hear this person is gay? It'll be like, hey, have you heard of PrEP? Can I help you access PrEP? Do you know know what a Title X clinic is. And so I think that's one major way. Another major way, and this is different state to state, but I know one thing in Michigan that we help young folks do a lot is each school district, when it comes to sex ed in their school, has a sex ed advisory board. And sex ed advisory boards determine the curriculum. So Michigan is not explicitly an abstinence only state. It unfortunately ends up being that way. But we are a state that kind of lets school districts decide what to do with these sex ed advisory boards, and young people can sit on the sex ed advisory boards and determine the curriculum that is taught in their schools. And so that's another major way that young folks can get involved if they're looking at a local level. I don't know what it is in other states, but it may be similar. So that's always something to look into. So I think those are the two major things, is giving young folks the tools and the language to talk about sex and destigmatizing that for them. So that way, when they talk about it with their friends, it's not just gossip, but they can educate each other and support each other. And then also getting involved on local level advocacy efforts. So whether that's sitting on your sex ed advisory board, finding an organization like MOASH where you can join an advisory council, all of those things are really powerful ways for young folks to get involved in ending the HIV epidemic in America. Certainly more that I haven't talked about, but that's what I have experience in.
Thank you for that, Leah. I really appreciate that. I love the thought and idea of that if the world does not educate your kids, or if the parents don't educate your kids, kids will educate your kids. So I love
Can
that.
I say something real quick, Chris? So I'm older than all of you. Actually, I'm older than two of you put together. I'm in my 50s. And my sex ed from the community was, don't have sex with white men because they give you worms. That was my sex education from my peers. Worms and HIV. That's what they said. That's a great example of what you just said. That was really, really powerful. I just had to share that because we wouldn't be having these conversations just a few years ago when I was some of your ages. So thank you for sharing that.
Right. And so even to those young people in those situations where you have kids telling you don't have sex with white people because you would get HIV and worms, you had youth who were spreading misinformation. You do have youth advocates like yourself, Leo and Joe, who create and operate in spaces to where you're spreading accurate information. And a thing that I commonly learned is just when working with young people and being a youth myself is that peer support and near peer education a lot of times are the things that stick. So I'm so grateful for spaces and organizations that create ways and tailor information that's correct and accurate and medically proven to be effective. So when we have our kids looking to their friends and their peers to educate them, they're educating them with some truth. They're educating them free of stigmatizing terms, free of stigmatizing language. They're educating them in ways that bring culture and science together, that make learning fun, that make talking about sex informative, that make talking about sex healthy. Hell, they make talking about sex sexy. So as a part of that, I appreciate organizations such as MOASH who create space for youth to figure out and understand and learn what sex ed is. And then once they have an understanding and learning of what sex is, they can then figure out how to educate their peers on the nuances of sex and the type of sex that they have. And this whole talk about ending the HIV epidemic within America leads me to our next question, because while we hear is that what does it take to end, our show is all about what does it take to end the HIV epidemic in America. The Ending the HIV Initiative Plan for America to end HIV through the 4 pillars of prevention, diagnosing, treatment, and responding, with the goals to see a 75% reduction in new HIV diagnosis by the year 2025 and the 90% reduction in new HIV diagnosis by the year 2030. And so when I say preventing, I mean prevention meaning the access and utilization of PrEP. Treatment as prevention for those of us living with HIV, because undetectable means untransmittable. The use of condoms, the use of safe sex practices, health communication, even different forms of different ways, modalities of using of lube and sex toys. And then you have diagnosing, right? So how are we diagnosing people who are engaged in high-risk sexual behavior? And the time period there is taking us to link them into care through status neutral approaches. And so when I say status neutral approach, I mean, I'm linking you to some type of care I'm treating you if you're HIV negative or HIV positive. Then we're going to be responding. So how are we responding to outbreaks in our community? How are we responding to the data? How are we responding to the needs of people telling us what they need? How are we responding to their health needs outside of their HIV and their sexual health needs? How are we approaching and tailoring programs to assist with their social determinants of health? Okay. And that's just a little bit of what the EHE initiative encompasses. And when we talked about within advocacy and activism, knowing your lane, right? Everybody has a role. Everybody has a say so. I don't have to be a medical provider. I can be that person, as Joy said earlier, that's passing out food. I can be that person who's making sure that people affected by HIV and live with HIV have equitable access to Narcan, right? So everybody has a role. So Joy, I want to ask you, what do you feel like is missing from the EHE initiative that would be helpful for more young people to get involved with our target goals to really make a dent in new HIV transmission diagnosis and the uptake of PrEP by the year 2030?
So I think one of the major things is really having people understand the sense of agency that they have over their bodies. That is something that in general, like when we're talking about HIV and we're talking about, ending transmission and we're talking about healthy living and healthy practices, I think before we even get to that conversation, we have to have a conversation about health in general and how it's nobody's responsibility but your own, for your own body, for your own safety, for your own wellness, to make that a priority. Because a lot of us, a lot of the time don't even, like, for example, how youth don't sometimes make their own doctor's appointments. They know something's wrong and they don't go to the doctor. Okay, like those conversations need to happen, I think, before we can even delve deeper, because then people will then understand the importance of making sure they're getting tested, they're getting checked out, that they are having safer sex practices, that they are engaging in conversations that, about their sexual and emotional and mental wellness. And all of that, then it won't be such a shock, as they have to go to more appointments, after they have to really take matters into their own hands. It won't be such a shock or so overwhelming for them, because we would have already been having conversations about, body agency, how, the only person responsible for your safety and your wellness is you. And these are the ways that you can be a part of that and do that. Having those conversations in the forefront, will make it more digestible later for, having these larger conversations about safe sex. Because most of the time, when we're talking about, sex and safer sex practices, so many people don't believe that these things are going to affect them. Like, oh yeah, that's them. I'm not in that zip code. I'm not a part of whatever. And I'm only saying that because we get that not only with HIV, with the HIV work that I've previously done, but also when we talk about, substance use, like, oh yeah, I'm not going to use as much as they used of whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, or, oh, I don't use that, so I'm not at risk of a substance use disorder. And that's not true. But because there has been no groundwork laid just with the importance of health and wellness in general and what that looks like from person to person, then it becomes overwhelming. Then it becomes this really daunting task. Then it becomes these really uncomfortable conversations that could be prevented if we really kind of put these conversations all, before there's even a disorder or a medical diagnosis associated with anything. If we just are having this conversation just about general health and wellness, and how important it is to take care of your body, no matter, what it is just potentially going on. I think that groundwork will make it a lot easier to have these conversations in general.
Oh, that was really good. And hearing you talk about body autonomy, I think I used a different word than you did, but that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about having agency over your body, which quite often is something we grow into, in part because our bodies are changing so much when we're young. But with that, just like there are a lot of folks who fall under the LGBTQIA plus spectrum who may not identify a certain way when they're considered youth or in the age range of folks that we're talking about. Life is full of transitions. And as a person who has transitioned medically and transitioned in terms of my pronouns and my appearance, I get that. But I think it's also important to understand that life is full of transitions. That's a line from an old gospel song too. But with that also being said, I think it's important for us to understand only 11% of youth between the ages of 16 and 24 who could actually benefit from some type of PrEP service, whether that's a pill, whether that's an injection, whatever the course is. Why do you think that the numbers are so low, and how can we help to change those numbers? Or how can you all, or how can anybody that's watching help to get more folks who could benefit from PrEP? And in part because we know that youth is still one of the fastest growing demographics, 16 to 24, but we also know that young MSM, and more specifically Black MSM, are folks who are still incredibly impacted by HIV. And also Black cis women, and then we know disproportionately Black trans women as well, and all transgender people.
I think one of the things that we most definitely have to start with is mental health. That's one of the number one priorities that we most definitely don't speak about as a nation. We don't speak about mental health in these particular demographics and cultures. And the reality of it is, when you are a mentally healthy person, you don't put yourself in harm's way. And so when you look at these statistics and you look at these numbers, it's a clear eye opener that mental health isn't talked about enough, self-love, confidence, and all the things that it takes to be, again, what your healthy looks like is not a conversation. And again, we can't even address who you sleeping with until we address how you feel about yourself. And because there's no way possible you can even pick, right, a type of individual that will serve you in a healthy way if you don't identify that you also can contribute to the toxicity in your life. And that could be based off of how you feel about yourself. And so because we already deal with hurt people, and that's the reality of it. And so because a lot of us come from oppressed environments, we're not accepted by our families, we're not accepted by our churches, we're not accepted, across the board. And it could be something so subliminal, nobody even necessarily has to even come to you and tell you you're not accepted in order to not feel not accepted. And so I think because mental health is not one of those things that's on the forefront of the conversation, and there's still such a large stigma around it, and we really downplay the impact that your mental health really has on your decision making in your life as a young person. I tell all my young people, you're one decision away from deciding to either go in a positive direction or a negative direction. You're literally one decision away. And so your mental health affects how you make your choices and your decisions. So your mental health is so important for you to be checked in. We don't talk about counseling enough. We don't talk about, again, once you identify that this is something that you're dealing with, people always say homosexuality and the gay lifestyle is a choice, right? They always say you choose to be gay. But in any right person's mind, who would choose to be oppressed? Who would choose to go through the adversities that we go through, living the lifestyle that we live? When I used to have my hair cut off like a boy because I didn't want to be viewed as attractive to men, right? Because I knew I identified as non-heterosexual. So I would cut my hair off. I gained all this weight, and physically I looked like what my mental health truly was, which was a sick person. That's what my outer appearance looked like. So as I began to fall in love with myself, then that's when I was able to change, and I started to identify and start to grow into who I was. And see, what happens is these young people are in a microwave generation. They're taught that they got to hurry up and make decisions. They're taught they got to hurry up and figure out life and figure out their purpose. And the reality is you really don't figure it out until you really kind of meet 35, 36 years old. We put our kids out when you turn 18, you're leaving. But in the reality, they don't even have the skill set that it takes to be a successful adult at 18 years old. I didn't even know how to do laundry at 18 years old. But a lot of times as parents, we operate in common sense, but common sense is not so common always. And so sometimes it takes life experiences. Sometimes it takes, and your role as a parent is never over because your job is to educate, develop, and connect, no different than my organization. And my goal is to teach you to be able to be self-sufficient without me in the world that you will live in. My mama taught me how to sew buttons on a shirt. Ask me how many times have I had to sew a button on a shirt? 0. So the world that they were preparing me for was a world that I would never have to experience. So even though they thought that they were preparing me for survival and what they thought I would need, the world that I was actually being groomed to grow up in was introduction to the internet and the microwave. I can remember when we got the first microwave. Seriously. So, and we do the same thing right now as parents with our children. We want to teach them what we think they will need, but we don't realize that we really need to be forward thinkers and progressive in our thinking and our thought process, because what they're going to need is something we've never experienced before.
Powerful, powerful words. And before we go to the next person, since you brought up mental health, I really want to give a shout out. They're not on this call, but BEAM, which was founded by Yolo Akili out of California. And BEAM stands for the Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. Mental health is a very, very interesting and powerful tool in self-discovery, in building self-confidence. But we also understand, because of the way that the inequity in healthcare systems, that there's also a lot of privilege that goes into accessing mental health services, especially if you're young and don't have private health insurance. But thank you for bringing that into the conversation. So with that being said, can we hear from Leo and Joy a little bit about some things that we can do? Maybe some of the reasons that young folks aren't are using PrEP services greater, using those tools that are there to prevent HIV, or some other ways that we can get youth involved in HIV advocacy.
I think that I don't have as much of an in-depth answer, I think, but I think that a lot of it is just that they don't know that it's there. I think there's a lot of lack of education that's happening. I think maybe I might be biased because I do sex ed work, but I think that sex ed is so lacking, especially around this area where young folks just don't know that it exists. When they do know that it exists, they don't know how they can access it. They don't know where to get it for free. They don't even know that you can get it for free. So I think those are some of the biggest issues, are just gaps in knowledge. And then after gaps in knowledge, I would say gaps in access. Who's driving young folks to get the PrEP? Do their parents know? Do they want their parents to know? Do their parents have to know? Do they know whether or not their parents have to know? I think it's a lot of like knowledge, and then a lot of accessibility are kind of the two things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Leo, but then it's also the responsibility of people who are in charge of these systems to make it easier for people to gain that access to them. Because again, if we know this generation does not necessarily want to have to do too much extra work, it is extra work to then have to go to the doctors more often and have these extra conversations and have to then learn about all this stuff on your own time, and then have to go get the PrEP, and then have to go, and then have to remember to take it every day. I mean, you also see people too, like at this point, with the conversation about birth control, like a lot of people have opted out of taking pill birth control and getting the shot, or getting, because you don't want to have the responsibility of taking it every day either. So if we're talking about accessibility, we have to curtail the message and curtail some of the ways that we talk about access to what would resonate with this generation in particular. So that's what I think.
That's really cool. And before Chris asks the next question, let me provide a little bit more additional context around different PrEP services. So Chris said earlier that for some people, taking a pill every day is a great prevention tool, and we generally ascribe that to PrEP. After the first of the year, and currently in the final rounds of research, there's going to be an amazing opportunity for many more folks to have PrEP through an injection, similar to what you just said about birth control. And for most folks, they probably will only have to do the injection once every 2 or 3 months. That's amazing. And that's less often than you'll have to do then some people will have to do an injection to not get pregnant or to reduce pregnancy. And so that's really, really important. I think that's also, Leo said, a friend of mine is a PrEP navigator and has been talking about that. It is really, really exciting. It's something, so I talk, if you follow me on social media, I talk, when I get a shot, I talk about that and how the experience is and how, for me, it is one of the ways to reduce anxiety. I won't have to worry about pill fatigue. I feel so safe and secure. Also making sure that people understand it is simply one additional option. And that's what we want. And so we really, really have to think about providing more tools for folks to not get HIV. And if they have HIV, making sure that folks understand that certainly there could be folks taking HIV medications through pill, but a shot, a once a month shot or a monthly shot is also a way for folks to get to undetectable as well.
Tori, some things that you said is actually going to lead us into the next question, but I wanted to talk about this. I think that from what everybody said, I think that the top 3 points when it comes to young people having the ability to be able to access PrEP is 1, accessibility, 2, is education, 3, and it's dissemination. So accessibility, meaning that young people need to be aware and know, hey, where can I access PrEP? Hey, do I need parental consent to access PrEP? 2, education. What is PrEP? What is PEP, which stands for post-exposure prophylaxis? And do I have to take my PrEP every day? Because actually, studies have shown there's a method of taking PrEP called 2-1-1. First, you take 2 pills, 2 to 24 hours before having sex, then 1 24 hours after the first dose, and then 1 a final dose another 24 hours later to be protected. And it has been proven effective in safeguarding you against HIV acquisition. And then 3, to what you said, Tori, about how you advocate on Facebook about your injections. Hey, how are people's getting their information, right? How is this information being portrayed? How are we disseminating the truth about PrEP uptake and PrEP usage, and what does it look like? And then 2, on commercials, who are our spokespeople, right? If we're trying to increase PrEP uptake among young people, when I sit back and watch a PrEP commercial, is there someone that looks like me? Is there someone within my age group talking about PrEP on that commercial? Do we have PrEP ambassadors within my community who are my age, who can give me that near peer experience as it relates to PrEP? And so acknowledging those 3 things, I want to talk about how has social media changed HIV and messaging about sexual risk and prevention.
Before you all talk, let me add a medical disclaimer in there real quick. So if anyone is interested in what Chris just mentioned, the 2-1-1 method, if they're interested in PrEP for prevention of HIV, if they have an HIV diagnosis and are interested in taking medication, which can get them to an undetectable viral load, none of us are doctors. Chris will be one before the rest of us will, because he's working on that right now. But none of us are doctors. And what we want to do is make sure that people have access, which is what we talked about through the right program, that people know, even if you don't have insurance, that you can speak with a medical provider who can provide you with the best information for.
Thank you for that. And so there's also a lot of links and information to PrEP, clinicians and providers for treatment as prevention in your area. If you go to www.cdc.gov, literally it is geolocating. All you have to do is put in your zip code and resources will pop up. But going back to the question, how has social media changed HIV and messaging about sexual risk and prevention?
I definitely think social media has put a digital footprint on it for more young people to have access to it. Is even as an organization founder like myself, it has created a conversation for me with parents. No different than I said in the chat. You know, parents now need to be have access and education around PrEP and different tools, because we have to look at the reality of the world that we live in now. Kids come out very young now. 13 years old is the average age that a young person identifies And so when I say parents need to know, because again, once my child comes to me, it's great that you're accepting and you're loving, but what is the next step? How do I educate my kid for the next phase of life? And so sometimes it's about being able to have this access. I think the social media has created that platform. I think it's also removing the stigma around it, because again, I come from an era, I have a family member, a sibling who identifies as HIV positive and has been non-detectable for many years. And I can tell you, when the initial diagnosis came, it was like a death sentence, right? And now, you're looking at 25 plus years later, and it's not even a conversation it's not even brought up. It's not even something that's even discussed anymore. So I definitely think the taboo around it, the stigma around it, but I also think there's not enough conversation around it as well that can create the educational component, that can also create the preventative care. And when we look at, again, statistically, the numbers don't lie. We look at that there are young people who rank number one across the board. And that says to me that parents still aren't educating and talking about preventative care with their young people, even if you are accepting of your young person and you do love them no matter what, and they're your kid and at the end of the day. But there's another step now as a parent that has to be taken to prepare your child for safety, right? And then also on the other side of that, I think our educational programs and systems also have to jump on board as well. And we need to start incorporating PrEP in the educational systems in the schools that do talk about safe sex as opposed to abstinent sex. I think PrEP definitely has to be a part of those conversations and post care as well. And so I'm gonna leave it at that.
I can share a little just in terms of how social media has changed messaging, maybe around sex and sex ed more broadly. I don't know specifically about HIV, but broadly around sexual health, I've seen it is a lot more accessible. And this is something Joy mentioned earlier too, is that there's a lot of the ways that young folks get information is on the internet. And so it's absolutely essential that there is like accessible information and accurate information on the internet. I think it's also just something that is normalizing conversations about sex. I pulled one up because you asked something we saw, and I just saw this like right before we started. A friend that I work with posted this meme, and I don't know if you can really see it, but this person's holding a banana with a condom on it and then a vibrator in the other hand, and she's saying, why is this sex ed and this is not sex ed? And like, why is this how we talk about these things? And this is something that my friend posted on her personal story. And these are like things that kids are talking about online, which I think is super cool. Oh, another major way that this happens online is through like advertisement campaigns. So some of the work we do at MOASH is with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Like, how can we get this information to young folks in an accessible way? And I participated in some like focus groups and like content revision with them, and didn't really know what went on with it. And then a few months later, I was on TikTok. There was like this person doing a little dance about like birth control, and it was MDHHS. And I was like, oh my God, I worked on that campaign. So I think that's just another really cool way that like information can be spread online.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that with social media, people are able to see the lives, like the everyday lives of real people who have these problems or who are going through these things, and feel seen. Commercials, I mean, as a young person, commercials just don't do it for me a lot of the time. First of all, you're going through the list of side effects and all this other, now I'm scared, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I don't want to, nope. There's certain things, just in general, like if we watch commercials and that have nothing to do with, HIV or sex ed, but just in general, commercials just seem so staged and so forced, and you really have no idea if these people that are being represented have any, are even connected to the issue, or if they're paid or whatever. So like, you have no idea, but you have social media where you basically, people are kind of putting their lives out there for us to see. So you can see and so people kind of are serving as ambassadors or lifestyle ambassadors for their everyday lives that they just are living. Now you have individuals who are, who are on TikTok showing like, when they wake up, they make their matcha in the morning, and then they go to the gym, and then they go take their PrEP, and then they go to school, whatever. And it's like, oh, like I do that on Tuesdays. Like, okay, and I can see their life. I can identify with that. And it makes it more real. And then it also makes it just, and that like interweb connection kind of also, makes you feel more connected to others. Now, granted, of course, with the internet, and social media, there are some downsides to it where like now we are extra connected all the time and a lot of stuff. But overall, though, we are able to, even if we don't have our own immediate community, like immediate physical community to connect with, there are people that we can at least, we can see their lives and we can kind of emulate what they're doing, or, feel connected to other people that are in a similar position. You could go through the comments and like, oh, okay, like, yeah, these people, like, we're all having the same, like, thinking the same things about this, content or, whatever. So I think social media has created a connectivity for people who might not have another covering, or a community in physical form, but then can have a community social, via social media, and, they don't feel as alienated or disconnected to other people, which I think is so important, especially as we kind of talked about mental health. You really kind of can't get through a lot of this stuff by yourself. And a lot of times too, like, we'll feel a certain way about an issue, and sometimes sometimes the issues are 100% real. Like we are absolutely, we know, like, we are being alienated, we're being targeted and things like that. But sometimes we have internalized those things, and we really start to believe those things about ourselves as well, or people are trying to figure out how to newly interact with us or things like that, and we kind of take it as rejection when it might not necessarily be, you know what I'm saying? So I think with social media, it makes it a little easier, as the people in your real life might be trying to figure out certain things, or how to have different conversation with you, and make that a little, and so you already have a virtual community at least to support you while you're going through these things in your personal real life, if that makes sense.
Okay. Wow. To everybody here and to our viewers, guess what? So we come to the end of the road. But I'm so excited today. This conversation was really so much amazing. We talking about Ryan White, and then we went from talking about the meaning and definition of pride to what youth activism looks like and just the different forms of youth activism. Then we talk about the importance of youth voice within the Ending the HIV Epidemic plan for America, and then taking it a step further to really dissecting that plan and then talking about how can we increase the uptake of PrEP for young folk, and how can we use social media in this new age form of youth activism to really make a dent in what HIV transmission looks like for today's young people. But before we end, I would like our beautiful and amazing, smart and talented and hyper-focused guests to share with our viewers some words of wisdom as how we can continue to engage young people within our community and then within HIV prevention programs. And once you share your word of wisdom, please, by all means, share your handles, your emails, your organizations, so the people can get in contact with you all, because they need to be working with y'all, because y'all are the voice and y'all are doing some amazing work. So let's start with Amanda and then go to Leo and follow up with Joy. And then I'll come back and give y'all a closeout.
I'm just going to say, as Chris said, follow the science. We follow the science with everything else. We have a new pandemic. We're following the science with the pandemic. The statistics don't lie. And if you have a young person who ranks high in these statistics and these categories, then that means you need to be putting in the extra work to provide the services or lead them to the services that they will one day eventually need, or preventative care, so that they don't need the services. And you can find me at www.rlc365.org. The organization is Real Life Connection. We host Dallas Teen Pride. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. You can find us, based here in Dallas, Texas. We host Teen Pride yearly, and we are always available and accessible to any young people, parents as well, for any additional information.
I would say, in terms of words of wisdom, how can you center youth in the work that you do? in everything that is being done. How are youth at the center and how are youth at the forefront? And are the youth getting paid? Please pay the youth. If you are able to pay the youth, pay the youth. Those are my words of wisdom. You can find me on Instagram. I'm Sydrave, SYDRAVE. I'm Sidley O'Reilly on Twitter. It's my full name, SYDLIORILEY. And then sidriley@umich.edu is my email. And then the organizations that I'm with are MOASH, the Michigan Organization on Adolescent Sexual Health. And you can find them at moash.org, MOASH.org. And then I'm also with the ETREN, and I don't have that website up, but if you Google ETREN, you can find them.
So my words of wisdom would be not to automatically shut the youth down if they have ideas, but to work with them to figure out how to kind of bring their ideas to life in a way that makes sense, not only for youth, but also, of course, obviously for the work that you're able to physically do, and also, you know, what's appropriate for your organization, right? But like just shutting them down is absolutely, let's just not do that. Let's figure out how to work together and to getting a result that everyone can enjoy. That might take some more work, but I think it's important that organizations do that, because that is one of the most important things. And then it also builds confidence for the young people to continue to be advocates in whatever realm they decide to go after they leave your organization, or if they move up in your organization. That's my words of wisdom. You can find me on all platforms at Joy Angelica, JOYANGELICA. I'm also an ETR Yen, so you can also follow us there as well, as Leo said earlier. And again, thank you guys for having us.
I believe that the children are our future. We should teach them well and let them lead the way and show them all the beauty that they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Make the children laugh. And I forgot the next words. So close Chris, thank you all for being here. What amazing. Wow, what an amazing conversation.
Oh my gosh, look, as Tori said, thank you to our amazing co-host. Thank you, Tori Cooper, for always being my leading lady through the facilitation of these. Thank you to Capacity for Health for giving us this opportunity. Thank you to CBC. Thank you to our production and to our fearless leader, Jamila the Ship. And thank you to our audience just for sitting back and listening to us. And this has been another episode of When Does It End? So stay tuned, subscribe, like, tell your sister, your uncle, your brother, your cousin, and your kids that we are here to give you the tea on how we are ending the HIV epidemic in America. Until we meet again, sending you love, light, peace, hope, and joy. Bye-bye.